my whole life, I have shot my right side, but for an entire month, I shot as a lefty. And I'm gonna tell you how I did it. I wanted to challenge myself to see if my learnings from the past 5 years with my shooting mechanics and changing everything that I knew about hockey ability and skills training could show up with me shooting basically the wrong way. While it hasn't yet produced like the same shot speed and accuracy, the very fact that I have somewhat good control with my, not just my stick handling, but my shooting, even though that was not good. You'll look at all these other videos and see that the improvement from day one is drastically different. My protocol was shooting 100 pucks a day whilst making minor adjustments with things like my wrist angle, carrying the top hand over versus not carrying it over. I shot with a 40 flex stick. I think the advantage I got with that was I got to learn the flex. But when I first started playing, I actually almost started out with shooting lefty. That was like the first hockey stick that I ever picked up, well, a player stick anyway. Swung it this way. My mom asked me if that was the way that I was shooting now, and I said no, immediately switched it back to a right-handed position, and that continued on to this very day. And I had barely tried it out like this, especially like this, until now where I'm intentionally going for the specific styles of shots that I talk about with the shooting standards and the mechanics and pillars behind it. Typically your top hand is the dominant hand that you have. So for most righties, they would hold the stick with their right hand, which would force the stick to be on their left side. And then likewise, if you're a lefty, then you would hold it the other way. That is not the case for me. I am right-handed and I traditionally hold the stick like this. But there's a very interesting analysis that I think it was from District 5 that looked at the specific people and players who are right-handed, who shot left, but also who shot right, and then made some correlations between shooting, stick handling, situational awareness, one-handed plays that works. I think it was a very interesting analysis if you want to check it out. There's a link in the description. I don't agree with every single aspect of it. I think there's some leaps in logic from what they were making there, but the overall concept of questioning something like that, I think is a very interesting discussion to have in the hockey training circles and even just the hockey community in general. So definitely go check that out. As you'll see on the first days that I shot, there was barely any motion with my hands, barely any smooth motion right here. And that's still kind of locked up to this day. But that was one of the first things that I noticed. Even though my footwork would be relatively set up, I was having trouble with stretching out my top hand to the opposing hip before rotating through to my target and as a release for the shot. So most of my first shots often look like this, where there's barely any motion up here. And I discovered something. Even though my intention was to rotate right here, I had no downward pressure, at least that I felt, from my top hand, which is my left hand, or sorry, my bottom hand in this case, which would be my left hand. I was not at least trying to do that throughout the motion, because I kept noticing that would come loose. I know that's something very hard to prove without like pads and actual scientific measures that way to measure the grip effect on the stick. But I can assure you that it's like when I really look back at how I was shooting, the first time that I was doing it, I was like, oh yeah, there was basically nothing holding on with that bottom hand, even though I was getting the rotation through. But I still think that that's a crucial first step for learning to shoot, which is another theme of this left-handed experiment. Was I was basically reteaching myself how to shoot. So I don't think it's a bad thing to start out basically all stiff and tight right here, as long as you have the footwork there. So if you're just standing up and you're rotating, then it's not going to have the same effect as, say, if you're wider and you try out that same thing and it causes that specific shot to happen. That's a first progression. I think that's the point, is focusing on your footwork, having that as a foundation. If I didn't focus on my footwork, probably wouldn't have had the same transformation in a month as I do now. I know there's a contentious debate as to whether it's like, oh yeah, use the hands or not, or like the hands do basically everything in your shot. I don't actually think that's the case. And I think that going through this again, I realize even more that like, hey, the footwork is even more important. So what I did for the first, like, let's say segment of days, and I'll break up the segments into 3 parts. So what I did basically for the first segment of days was kind of shoot like this, try to make some minor adjustments, but I was always shooting off of my right foot in this case, or my knob side foot. So even once I started to get more of a stretch right here before I'd release my shot, I was still shooting off of my right foot. Like I said, this would be a progression, is going from here to then stretching out right here before releasing. But I also noticed something else from doing that, and that was actually what I'm still trying to correct from doing this, is the hand position. And that actually inspired how the best players use their hands in their shot, and clarifying this specific kink of the wrist, where that actually causes the hand to come out of the body, or what everyone says comes out of the body, when it's really just a supination of the wrist that then carries over as you rotate through. If something starts out supinated, then you pull your elbow across your body, the hand position is going to change. If you're keeping it right here, basic biomechanics actually behind this, you pull your elbow, you twist your shoulder, you twist your hips, all that. Look, even though the hand is still supinated primarily, it's now into this position. So you're completely changing the angle of your wrist, and then instead of focusing on the elbow, which is what most coaches I think should do with this, they focus on the wrist, which is where they get the illusion that the hand is out, even though it's a primarily supinated wrist position that just rotates in and out. I know, something very complicated, but remember, basically, if I were to talk to this as if you were in grade school, supinated right here, as you twist, the wrist doesn't change position as you go to here. So it's not a hand that does this. That is distinctly different. Punching out, that is distinctly different from rolling over. You can tell, I think, pretty clearly that this, not the same as that. So keep something like that in mind. And I hope that was one of the clearer explanations I've had with the specific wrist positioning. But that was something that opened up to me as I started to open up my shot a lot more. Going into another segment of shooting this way, I started to play around with different foot positionings and trying to shoot off my left foot, in this case, my blade side foot, and I had so much trouble with it off ice. I'd often just keep staying right there. I think that there's a better transition with that specific 1 foot shot to right here when you're on skates and you have like a surface area that uses that, because with that specific shot, you need to arc at the same time that you shoot to compensate for more hip rotation that you would otherwise get if you were on your knob side foot. So that's why you'll see guys like Bedard and Patterson, and even there's a Crosby and McKinnon example of them basically kind of accelerating as they shoot, or they'll anchor as they shoot. Their ankle will collapse if they're on this side, and then that'll like basically rotate them through. That was very hard to replicate off ice. Like I couldn't get that. I had so much trouble with that specific kind of like anchor shot or blade side inside edge shot. I think actually now I'm here, I'm going to get some reps on that specifically because that's going to open up another option for my shooting specifically. So that was another segment of shots that I discovered were popping up for me when shooting as the wrong hand. During this segment too, I started to notice that my shoulders wouldn't relax the same way as they would with my right hand side, in addition to the wrist flowing, in addition to everything else, which I think was contributing to the lack of pull-in with my release. If your shoulder is stuck right here, it's very hard to extend the pull of your shot, whereas if you have it protracted and rounded forward and you start out right here, you can pull it even more just because you have more ability to rotate when your shoulder gets rounded and protracted forward. Yes, that means the best players have bad posture because they're always rounding their back and keeping their shoulders forward, but that's what allows them to pull the puck around a given obstacle. You see I still need work on it because that went away, but that was something still very interesting, was that's how much the shoulders and the upper body affects the shot mechanics. So I thought about that into my shots, and the better that I brought awareness to that specifically, the slowly better and better my pulling got. Still not great compared to my right side, of course. It's not going to be, considering I've shot like millions of pucks at this point with my right side. But for a month transformation with, if you multiply 100 by 30, isn't that like 3,000 or so for 3,000 shots? That's like not terrible to happen with the shoulder. Now for the last segment, I want to clarify something as well, that the entire time I was shooting with something that was a 40 flex stick, which had its ups and downs. Was I was able to at least feel the flex on my stick compared to something that was a lot stiffer. The downside was that it was way too short. So it kind of changed up the mechanics a little bit, but now that I have something that's a little bit longer, I can at least get a slightly better flex, albeit some things are still off with the specific mechanics themselves. And I think I'll make more of this last segment kind of like the learnings and reflections, even though the entire video is on that. Should every player do this? No, I don't think this isn't for them. Should every coach do this though? That's another question. I think there's room for experimentation with this if you're trying to, let's say, prove your theories as correct or falsify your theories. Then this is a great way to do something like that, because you're kind of starting from square zero with your shooting. And that's kind of the premise as to why I did it, because I wanted to see if everything that I learned, especially recently, was going to help me shoot literally the opposite way that I've learned for close to 15 years at this point, because I started when I was like 8 and I'm right around 25 in a day or so. But and then not to mention all the pucks that I shot at my garage, probably tore it down at one point, sorry mom and dad. But and everything else I broke, I even got a window too. Went through like 10 different nets, and finally got a shooting tarp that also didn't last as long. But anyway, like the point of it is the volume of shots that I had with my right hand maybe or maybe won't match up. I probably could match it up if I like really wanted to dig in and just like, you know, sling some pucks, probably 1,000 pucks a day, but I don't have that time currently with everything else that I want to work on. So circling back, I think coaches would benefit from this, maybe not players. I think the learnings from this, basically like reteaching yourself to shoot, making sure that your methods like align up on both sides. That's basically the point of doing something like this. So I'm gonna get some more reps with Hockey House here, as they have like a shooting simulator, and I can actually do a bunch of catch and releases with it, and get a bunch of repetitions that way. I'm partnering up with these guys, so if you're around Waterford, Michigan, I'll actually have the location in the description and their website. We're starting to do camps very soon, so if you want to train with me in person, this is where I'll be for on-ice sessions, and also the specific shooting simulator sessions. And then if you want to work with the standard school, that's also down there. HED for Hockey is down below, and then one-on-one custom online coaching or in-person coaching if you're around the Westland area is another option. So I'm going to get back to shooting. I want to thank you for watching. I'll see you next time. Let's set this thing up. Still a struggle. So be it. All right, he's traditionally a lefty and I'm traditionally a righty.